Om. Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Vunaktu Sahovyam Karavavahai Tejasvina Aditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto thee, unto us, and to all your beloved children everywhere. Hari Om Tat Sat, dearly beloved. Make it so. Well, namaste, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday evening reading of the book Realizing God. Our discussion of this will be minimal because Swami Prabhavananda did such a wonderful job of expressing his thought that there's rarely anything really needs to be added or supplemented. If there is, of course, Jaime will be interrupted and we'll have a little discussion about it. But we'll see how little that can be managed. Before we start, anything at all from anyone about their own spiritual journey or any concern or question? All right, dears. Jaime will tell us where we are in the book, and she'll begin reading.
Thank you, Shankara. Good evening, everyone, and namaste. We are on page 78 of the Realizing God book by Swami Prabhavananda. Page 78 at the top, first paragraph. But if I read the previous small few lines, that would connect better. So I go back to 77. Small paragraph, Brother Shankara, that would connect this, what is coming up when I looked at it. Okay, going back to page 77, last bottom paragraph. In the West, we find philosophers at a loss to explain how the mind becomes unconscious. If consciousness is its inherent nature, it will always remain conscious. The inherent nature of fire is heat. So if it loses heat, it's no longer fire. According to Indian psychology, the mind is just like iron placed in fire. It's hot. But take the iron away from the heat and it's no longer hot because heat is not its inherent nature. Berkeley said, in sleep and trance, the mind exists not. There is no time, no succession of ideas. To say that mind exists without thinking is a contradiction. The explanation in Indian psychology is that John, after a good sleep, continues to be John since experiences unite themselves to the system which existed at the time he went to sleep. They leave themselves in his thoughts. They do not fly to any other being. This continuity of experience requires us to admit a permanent self underlying all contents of consciousness. In the Katha Upanishad, we read this truth. Here it is. He through whom man experiences the sleeping or waking state, is the all-pervading self. Knowing him, one grieves no more. To simplify, we can classify these 5 coverings in 3 headings: physical, subtle, and casual. Causal, physical, subtle, and causal. When we are awake, we are in these 3 states and conscious of all 3: physical, subtle, and causal. When we dream, we are not conscious of the physical, but we still have the covering of the mind of the subtle body. And when we are in dreamless sleep, there is still the covering of what we call the causal sheath. This sheath is blissful because it's nearmost to the Atman, the nature of which is bliss. That is why when we wake up, we feel, what a rest I had, how happily I slept. Within these 3 states of consciousness, the Atman cannot be known, Brahman cannot be known. We have to go beyond them and reach what we call the 4th, Turiya, the transcendental, to realize the Atman is Brahman. This idea that the Atman is Brahman is not unique to Vedanta. If we study the main religions of the world, we shall find they also say the same thing. Sri Ramakrishna used to say in fun, all jackals in their highest pitch have the same cry. You can't distinguish them. In Romans, we read, the Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God, and if children, then heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. But it's a matter of experience. However you understand and study the scriptures, your ignorance is direct and immediate. And only direct and immediate experience can take it away. In the Mahabharata, we read, in the Mahabharata, we read, he who has no personal knowledge but has heard many things cannot understand the scriptures, even as a spoon has no idea of the taste of the soup. Now, how to realize this truth? There are 2 kinds of truth. That which is perceived by the 5 ordinary senses or inferred from the data provided by them is one kind of truth. Another is that which is perceived by the subtle, super-sensuous power of yoga. Swami Vivekananda gives the example of a mirror covered with dust. There's no reflection. Take away the dust and you see a perfect reflection. The mind or intelligence must be cleaned to attain the purity in which the truth becomes revealed immediately. In the Upanishads, we read, by the purified mind alone, Brahman is to be achieved. From Katha Upanishad. I would say that you have purity of heart when your mind spontaneously moves toward God, when it is thinking of God all the time. And I would say to achieve this purity of heart, there are 2 practices: self-control or following ethical life, and meditation. In the Upanishads, we read, this self who understands all, who knows all, and whose glory is manifest in the universe, lives within the lotus of the heart, the bright throne of Brahman, with mind illumined by the power of meditation. The wise know him, the beautiful, the immortal. From Mundaka Upanishad. Of course, meditation does not mean that we close our eyes and give up our duties and actions, but our actions must be dedicated to God. That also must be a process of meditation. In the Gita, discussing meditation, we read, a man can be said to have achieved union with Brahman when his mind is under perfect control and freed from all desires, so that he becomes absorbed in the Atman and nothing else. The light of a lamp does not flicker in a windless place. This is the simile used for the one-pointed mind of a yogi who meditates upon the Atman. When, through the practice of yoga, the mind ceases its restless movements and becomes still, he realizes the Atman. Then he knows that infinite happiness, which can be realized by the purified heart, but is beyond the grasp of the senses. The ego is completely wiped out only in the highest samadhi, when one is completely absorbed in meditation. When one comes back from that, the ego comes back, but it is harmless ego, just like a burned rope. Then again, there is the experience called Savikalpa Samadhi, when one has the vision of God and at the same time the sense of ego. You may call that qualified non-dualism. After that, when you come to normal consciousness, as Sri Ramakrishna said, it is just like an ocean divided by a line. The line of that ego, you are here, God is there. So you think of God, you meditate upon God, you pray to God. That's the end of this particular topic, which is the self. Now we are moving on to the impersonal self, Brother Shankara. Any comments you want to make, or should I?
To say about what was just read, which was very, very comprehensive, and a lot was said. Anything at all from anyone about what was said by what was read by Haima in the last few minutes. All right, dear Haima, please read on.
Yeah. Next topic is the impersonal life. Before we can understand what an impersonal life means, we have to understand what personal life means and what individuality means. According to Vedanta, man is fundamentally spirit and is encased in three sheets: physical, subtle, and causal. The spirit is spirit because it is an unchangeable reality, the nature of God. In all human beings, there is a sense of that presence. We all know how we change our body, mind, senses, sense organs, everything changing every moment. But at the same time, there is a consciousness in everyone, in the ignorant as well as the wise, that I am I. You are what you are in spite of all the changes. But in our ignorance, none of us know exactly what this I am is. The search for God, for reality, ends ultimately in what I may call realizing the true nature of the self, the Atman, as Brahman. I and my Father are one. Why is it that none of us knows this Atman? Because of an ignorance which is universal, from the highest intellectual man to the most ignorant and barbaric. For instance, every one of you can understand that you are not this body, but in your practical behavior, in all your experience in life, you identify yourself with the body. If somebody pinches you, You feel it. Then again, ignorance creates something which has no reality. The ego, I as an individual being, separate from everybody and separate from God. The identification of the spirit or Atman with the body, mind, senses, and sense organs has created the sense of ego. And upon this false self, the ego, is centered all our world. Each one of us, as it were, lives in our own world. Sri Ramakrishna gave the illustration of an onion. You pull off one layer after another to find out what is inside, and there is nothing inside. Am I this body? Am I the character that I have? Am I the mind? They also change. What is your individuality? You are living under an illusion all the time that you have an individuality. It has no reality. Your whole life is centered upon that. As a result, you experience pleasure, pain, birth, death, heat, cold, all the dualities of life. In other words, this relative experience. And with this experience, we become attached to things that give us pleasure. We are averse to things and objects and persons that give us pain. In order to gain happiness or pleasure, we do this, good or bad, and we become subject to the law of karma. What we sow, we reap. Let us see where the karma attaches itself. Who is doing the good or bad deeds? The Atman? No, you, I. Everybody has the sense, I do this. Who is this I? That ego, that big fat ego. Now, as long as there is the identification of the Atman with the body, mind, senses, and so on, there is the ego arising out of it. And we remain subject to the law of karma, to birth, death, and rebirth. So what is the nature of Brahman or God or this Atman? Sat Chit Ananda. Existence, consciousness, bliss. Ananda means bliss, the peace that passeth understanding. Now, these are not distinct, not different. Sat is Chit and Ananda. Where there is existence, there is life. There is consciousness and there is happiness. To feel I am or to know I am conscious or I am happy, these are only the reflection of that Brahman of Sat Chit Ananda. And when there is the urge to overcome this, we transcend this ego and reach the reality, what we are truly. The question arises in everyone, what about our individuality? Is it lost? As I just pointed out, you're not yet individuals. Where is your individuality? You are an ocean of existence, knowledge and bliss. That is the background of every one of us. We are all the time united with that. Huge waves are a Christ or Buddha, and a little ripple is you or me. But our background is that one vast ocean of existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. There are two ways to transcend the ego. As G.C. Ghosh said about Swami Vivekananda, Maya or ignorance tried to bind Vivekananda, but he got so big there was not enough rope to tie him down. And Nag Mahashay became so lean and thin that Maya could not put a knot around him. These are the two paths. the path of knowledge and the path of devotion. Jnana, the path of knowledge, is very difficult. It is a direct path that denies the ego completely. It denies the universe of name and form and holds on to that reality as Brahman. I am Brahman. No ego at all. But as Sri Ramakrishna said, is it possible to live like that? If you say there is no thorn and put your hand on a thorn, will it not prick you? The path of devotion is to surrender your ego to God. But where is that God? Within yourself. The Atman is your chosen ideal. If you worship Christ, He is the Atman within you, dwelling within the shrine of your own heart. Now again, I must tell you, there are main principles. The first is what we call Shraddha, or faith. We cannot just jump into transcendental consciousness. You have to struggle through the grace of God. But in order to feel that grace, you have to set your sail. So there has to be struggle. And the first step is faith, in the words of the Guru and in the words of the scriptures. The Guru and the scriptures point out that God is within each one and that others have realized God, that you must have the faith in yourself that you too can realize God. You have to have this faith. Then you have to have enthusiasm. You must have interest for the truth of God. For that, you have to meditate. You have to concentrate and think of God. Then interest grows. Enthusiasm comes, and you begin to think of God more and more. From that enthusiasm comes a current of thought, what St. Paul taught as praying unceasingly, or what Hindu philosophers call constant recollectedness. As that comes to you, you attain to the knowledge of the Atman or Brahman, which means nothing but self-realization. You realize your own soul as one with God. Mahavakyas have power behind them. The Guru, during initiation into the monastic life, utters one of these Mahavakyas according to the particular sect to which that monk belongs. There are 4 such Mahavakyas, and they have the same meaning, though the words are different. They convey the one supreme truth that the Atman, the self, is one with Brahman. This truth is very hard to grasp. It is to be realized and experienced within our own consciousness. Sri Ramakrishna, in this present age, emphasized this one truth of religion, the substance of all religions, that you have to experience the truth of God. Not by learning or by subtle arguments and not by the study of the scriptures, because this truth goes beyond the scriptures or any expression. He pointed out again and again, you can see God, you can talk to God, you can see Him more intimately than I see you before me. You can converse with Him. You become one with Him. He is your very self. And to reach that union with Him, to realize that I am Brahman, is the supreme realization and the experience of total reality. When we say that Vedanta believes in oneness with God, and then we say, I am God, there is this misunderstanding. How can I claim to be God, who is the creator of this universe? I may realize the Atman, but can that be one with the God who creates and sustains this universe and unto whom this universe goes back? It's not possible. I may realize the Atman as Brahman, but I won't be one with God in that sense. I won't be able to create the universe. When I realize the Atman as Brahman, the universe disappears. Do not misunderstand that. This is the same as I am one with God. God as a personal being and I as an individual being are separate. When we experience Brahman as the absolute, the impersonal, then there is no creation, no universe. We can only spell these words, but nobody has the ability to conceive or think of that. But it can be experienced. And when it is experienced, you become dumb, though you may try to express it. It's just like a dumb man trying to express how ice cream tastes. So how did this universe come into existence? Brahman, when associated with his power, Prakriti, Maya, Shakti, manifests creation. Brahman associated with this Shakti, we call Ishvara, our personal God. I cannot be one with that personal God who is the creator. Then what am I? I am a jiva, an individual being, which is Brahman associated with part of that power. In other words, you are also Brahman, but associated and identified with part of this Maya, part of this power. Brahman associated with the universal power as Ishvara has control over his Shakti, his Maya. You and I as Jivas with that little part of Maya are under the control of this Maya. We are ignorant. We are deluded. To realize the supreme truth, we have to rise above and beyond the part of Maya with which we are identified. We shall come to that. But as long as you have physical consciousness and consider yourself as weighing so many pounds or feeling not so well, so long are you separate from God. In fun, Swami Vivekananda used to say, when I'm feeling very well, I'm Brahman. When I have a stomachache, I say, oh, mother. With qualified non-dualism, we feel I am an individual being, a part of the universal being, a part of Ishvara, not Brahman. Brahman, the absolute, cannot have parts. The infinite cannot be divided into parts. But as regards the personal God, God as the creator and preserver. I am his creation. I am a part of him. And then again, when the supreme experience comes and I transcend the body and mind and senses, there is purified mind, and I realize my oneness. Now, of course, this is a matter of experience. But what kind of experience? In any kind of knowledge, you have the duality of subject and object, and also there is a separate process of knowledge. I see this. I know this. I and this are separate. As long as we have this separateness, the thing in itself is not known. Whatever sensation is brought to the mind by external objects, that sensation is read as that object. The wife considers her husband wonderful at one time and then again says, oh, what a nasty fellow he is. The same way the husband with the wife. It depends upon the mood. It's not that there is anything wrong with the wife or husband. It is the reading. If you read properly, there's Brahman in the husband, in the wife, and in yourself. That is the truth that we have to realize. This experience is not, therefore, subject-object, but what Shankara points out as the untying of the three knots of knowledge. The subject, the object, and the process of knowledge become unified. This is in English called unitary consciousness. You see, there is no way to express this. Whether a Christian, a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Jew, or a Hindu, one who attains that supreme truth realizes identity with Brahman. This Atman is Brahman. Why do we have to realize and experience God? Why not simply believe in God? Be good, do good, and when we die, go and live with the saints of God in heaven. That's a very comfortable religion, but that's not Christianity or Hinduism or Buddhism or anything. It's no religion at all. Matthew Arnold defined religion as ethical life with a tinge of emotionalism. But the truth has to be experienced, and true religion is experiencing God. Throw away all dogmas, doctrines, and theology, and establish a relationship with God. Think of God, love God, worship God, meditate upon God, be united with God. That is the whole of religion. You may consider yourselves weaklings and sinners, but if you go to any scripture, what does it say? In the Psalms, you read, you are God's. In Romans, you read, the Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. If Christ realized, I and my Father are one, that is the experience you and I must also have. In the Mundaka Upanishad, a beautiful picture is given. Like two birds of golden plumage, inseparable companions, the individual self and the immortal self are perched on the branches of the self-same tree. The former tastes of the sweet and bitter fruits of the tree. The latter, tasting of neither, calmly observes. The individual self, deluded by forgetfulness of his identity with the divine self, bewildered by his ego, grieves and is sad. You see, it is the individual who, by tasting the sweet and bitter fruits of the tree of life, is grieved and is sad. But when he recognizes the worshipful Lord as his own true self and beholds his glory, he grieves no more. There is an analysis in the Upanishads. The Atman, which is one with Brahman, is covered in 5 sheets. One, the physical body is made up of food. It is called the Annamaya Kosha. Then the Pranamaya Kosha, the vital sheath, gives us the power to breathe and live. The Manomaya Kosha, the sheath of mind, receives the impressions from the outer world. Then Vijnanamaya Kosha is the sheath of discrimination. And the Anandamaya Kosha, the blissful sheath, is the sheath of ego. In our 3 states of consciousness, waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, we identify with one or the other of the sheets, or with all the sheets. When we are awake, you identify yourself with all the sheets. When we're dreaming, you identify yourself with some of the sheets. When you're in deep sleep, you identify yourself with the sheath of ego, or causal, or blissful sheath. It's blissful because it's very near to the Atman, which is blissful. In that state, there remains just one sheath of ignorance, which is the cause of all delusion. Within the three states of waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, nobody can see God. But when you have attained the supreme truth beyond the three states of consciousness and you come back, your vision has changed. It's not only in samadhi that you can see God. Samadhi or nirvana is beyond these three states. When you come back, you have the eye of the spirit, as it were. Then even in the so-called dreaming and waking states, you see God. I've seen my master absorbed inwardly, but externally he would be teaching or talking to us. At one time, I was having a discussion with another brother disciple. I said that one can only see God in samadhi, and I tried to explain away the experiences of some of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna or his own experience by saying that they were in Bhavamukha. Bhavamukha is, there is the footnote I will read. It is a high state of spiritual awareness between the relative and the absolute, the mind moving between the Ajna and Sahasrara chakras. My master happened to hear me from his room. Coming out and standing by the door, he said, "So you have become omniscient?" I asked him, "But sir, do you mean to say that with these physical eyes one can see God and can talk to him?" Then he said in English, "Show me the line of demarcation where matter ends and spirit begins." You see, as long as we do not have the eye of knowledge, as long as we're in ignorance, we may talk about spirit and God and all that, but we only see matter. But when the divine sight opens up and our eyes change, then we see no matter. Then nothing is matter. Spirit alone is. God alone is. But in order to have this experience, we have to practice spiritual disciplines. Sri Ramakrishna gave the illustration. There is fire in the fuel, and you may say fire is here, but it doesn't come out. You have to light that fire. Then only can you cook and satisfy your hunger. Shankara points out, a buried treasure is not uncovered by merely uttering the words, "Come forth." You must follow the right directions, dig, remove the stones and earth from above it, and then make it your own. In the same way, the pure truth of the Atman, which is buried under Maya, and the effects of Maya can be reached by meditation, contemplation, and by the spiritual disciplines such as a knower of Brahman may prescribe, but never by subtle arguments. The main principle in spiritual discipline is meditation, contemplation. You have to learn to go within. The senses are going outward. The mind is traveling outward. The senses have to be controlled. The mind has to be turned inward. You can't find God gazing into the sky. You have to find him within yourself first. Then you find him everywhere. I have often repeated the truth that I learned from my master. He who has it here, pointing to his own heart, has it everywhere. If he has it not here, he has it nowhere. So the kingdom of heaven is within, and our outgoing mind has to be turned inward. With the help of that consciousness, which is God, with the help of that consciousness, which is one with God, we are living and moving and having our being in God all the time. every moment of our life. Because a living being is a conscious being, and consciousness is of the Atman, the self that is one with Brahman. With the help of that consciousness, I see you and I can do good or bad deeds. In the Mundaka Upanishad, we read, the sage knows Brahman, the support of all, the pure effulgent being in whom is contained the universe. They who worship the sage and do so without thought of self cross the boundary of birth and death. The sage or avatara is like a pure mirror upon which is reflected the Atman, the self. When they say, I am the light, the way, the truth, the sanctuary, be devoted to me. That me is not any individual, that is Brahman. Any comments, Brother Shankara? This particular issue, the topic is very long. We have another 4 pages left. If anybody wants to make a comment, Brother Shankara, you want to give us some of your wisdom, or anyone else wants to stop me, or I can go.
Now, hold on.
Okay. I have read quite a bit, so.
It's so very important for us to remember that as long as we are allowing our attention to be directed outward, we will never be able to realize the truth of our reality, the being that is within. Very early in this, there was talk of an iron being put in the fire. As long as it's in the fire, it remains red hot. If you take it out of the fire, it goes cold, and there is no more heat within it. Well, this is the truth of our being. As long as we are embodied, that fire is running through us. But as long as we're entranced with the world and experiences of the senses, we don't know why we are alive. We don't know that this fire, this heat that is running through us is not of our own production. And that has nothing to do with eating food or any of the, the first 2 koshas, the anamaya, the body kosha, and the psychic energy kosha. It has to do with the inner koshas, the mind, the manomaya, the vijnanamaya, and the anandamaya. But we never discover those until we learn to turn ourselves within. So this is why this whole long exposition to try to convince us that there is no profit. As Hamlet says, everything of the world is stale and fruitless. Shakespeare puts these words in Hamlet's mouth. And it is a profound statement of what that play is going to develop as an idea. Just so, the Swami is giving us these ideas so that we can grasp the meaning of the play in which we are involved. This play of Maya, of Shakti. So, as long as we allow ourselves to be drawn along by the things of the world, then we are in a, what Swami Chaitananda would say, is a hopeless condition. Until we turn within and learn to control the senses and gain the knowledge of the nature of the mind. Hopeless condition. Anything else from anyone while we're stopped? All right, dear, please read on.
Okay. Here in one of the 4 Mahavakyas, a disciple has to reason upon it, not to accept it at face value, but to reason it out and try to get an intellectual understanding of what this Atman is and what Brahman is. It's not possible to prove the existence of God. So what is the proof? Go to a Christ and ask him, and he will say, I have seen him, I have known him. And he doesn't stop there. He also says, you also can know him. That is religion. Belief in God makes no difference. An atheist is much better because an atheist is thinking. This may sound blasphemous, but it is the fact. You see, there is no atheist. One can be an agnostic, but atheism is not sincere. How can one know there is no God? An agnostic will experiment and experience the truth. In the matter of inquiry into Brahman or God, the only proof is your personal experience. Until you have realized that there's no difference between you and an agnostic or an atheist. All the great teachers of the world, from ancient times to the present, have ultimately experienced, I and my Father are one. I am Brahman. You may begin as a dualist and pray to God somewhere above, but you will begin to feel that God within. Ultimately, that experience comes to every sincere seeker. What we are all seeking is freedom, happiness, pure knowledge, pure love, and the nature of the Atman or God within us is such. There is the struggle in every one of us to unfold that divinity, but the struggle begins only when we realize that in the infinite alone are happiness and fulfillment. Then spiritual life has begun. Of course, when you learn this truth, thou art that, or that art thou. You do not identify thou with your empirical ego or self. That would be blasphemous. Man, as he knows himself to be, is not Brahman, is not God. He is a jiva, an individual being. The Guru sees God in the disciple and points out that thou art. Meditate upon that. It is said that a disciple who learns to see Brahman in the Guru becomes the Guru. Sri Ramakrishna was seated with his disciples and said, do you know what I see? I see Brahman. I see Rama. My master one time said to me, I see God playing in so many forms, just masks. God has put on different masks, the mask of a sinner and the mask of a saint. But a holy man or woman sees no sinner, only Brahman, only God. That is the supreme experience. And it is a matter of experience. Those who become interested in spiritual life may begin as dualists, worshipping God as a separate being, and they learn to love God. But when this love becomes intense, then the lover, the beloved, the love become one. So whether you begin as a dualist on the path of devotion or a non-dualist on the path of knowledge, ultimately you are led to that one non-dual experience. If you go to the source of any religion, you will find that most theological ideas are dualistic. But the great mystics in every religion, in every age, in every country, have attained to the same experience of non-dualism. When Christ says, "Be ye perfect, even as the Father which is in heaven is perfect," that perfection is achieved when this ideal, this goal is attained. One Christian mystic, Meister Eckhart, from the depths of his own experience said, "Some there are so simple as to think of God as if he dwelt there, and of themselves as being here. It's not so. God and I are one." This experience is not merely an intellectual experience or understanding. You see, our ignorance, our limitations that we find in ourselves are direct and immediate experience. We have to have another direct experience, just as the Guru has said, and see that we are Brahman. Know it, realize it. Until then, there will be no freedom from ignorance and limitation and the bondages of life. The ultimate truth cannot be comprehended intellectually because our intellect works within certain limitations, time, space, and relativity. And this experience is beyond time, space, and relativity. You have to hear about the truth, reason upon it, intellectually try to grasp it, though you cannot, and then meditate and meditate and meditate until it becomes revealed to you. The Zen Buddhist authority, D.T. Suzuki, says, since ultimate truth cannot be comprehended intellectually, philosophers are not necessarily wise men. Only the person who has known the real self can know what he's talking about. Make every effort to realize the self, for there can be no joy in the universe for one who is restricted to the empirical ego. You see, we are restricted, we're confined to this empirical ego, which I know as myself. Swami and John and Jill are not Brahman. This ego has no reality. It's a shadow, but we hold on to that shadow as real. Please try to convince yourself that when you're worshiping, what you want to realize is within yourself, is your true self, but covered by the physical sheath, the vital sheath, the sheath of mind, sheath of intellect, and the sheath of ego. None of this is Atman, the true self. I consider myself as an individual being because I have a body and mind separate from yours. I have an ego, and this is what separates each individual from God and each individual from others and from the universe. In reality, there is only unity, oneness. Ignorance is nothing but identifying the Atman, the true self, with the sheaths. You can easily understand through analysis that you are not the body, what is changing all the time. In a few years, it will be a completely different body. And yet, in every behavior, in every empirical experience, we identify ourselves with the body. If you pinch me, I say, "Wow, it hurts," because there is this identification. But when I have the knowledge of the Atman and I'm completely detached, you can hurt the body and I won't be hurt. The mind is subject to pleasure and pain, and I identify myself with the mind. As such, sometimes I'm happy, sometimes unhappy, sometimes in a good mood, other times in a bad mood. I identify myself with all the moods and changes of the mind. But in reality, my true nature, the Atman, is blissful. And when that blissful nature is experienced, I remain in bliss. When we say that God can be known, it's not within the 3 states of waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. You have to transcend these 3 states, and this power to attain samadhi or nirvana is within one of us potentially. Plato pointed that out in these words. The object will not be to generate in the person the power of sin. On the contrary, it assumes that he possesses it, though he is turned in a wrong direction and does not look to the right quarter. Its aim is to remedy this defect. There's one ether, but there are walls. So there is ether within the walls and ether outside the walls. Take away the walls and there is one ether. Take away ignorance, there's one Atman, one God, one Brahman. I must try summarily to explain to you what is really meant by superconscious or transcendental revelation. In our relative knowledge or experience, I am the knower and there is an object of knowledge. There is a subject and there is an object. I know this, and this that I know is something separate from me. Now again, what I know and experience is only a relative truth, because when I see and experience it, what the object is in reality, I do not know. Only a sensation is produced by my perception of the object, which I interpret in my own way. As the great German philosopher Immanuel Kant pointed out, the thing in itself remains unknown, and he said unknowable. Our great Indian philosophers also pointed out that as long as there is the least demarcation between the subject and the object, the reality does not become known. But there is such a thing as untying the 3 knots of the knower, the object of knowledge, and the process of knowledge. There is such an experience of unified consciousness, and only when we reach that unified consciousness do we know the reality. But of course, you can't say, I know it, because it is being and becoming. Some try to express the inexpressible by saying, there is thou and that, or I and Brahman. But no, it is oneness, absolute existence, absolute knowledge, and absolute bliss. That's what is meant by the supreme ideal of life. Brother Shankara, I will put a stop here. It's your time is 1 minute. Yes, 1 more minute we have if you want to give us any of your wisdom.
Well, I don't think there's anything for me to add
Okay.
to what the Swami has been saying. If we've been listening carefully, and I'm sure we have, then you've been gathering a tremendous amount of the wisdom of the great teachers of the world as passed along to us by Swami Prabhavananda. So we'll leave it there for this evening.
Yeah.
And thank you, Haima, for the wonderful reading.
You're welcome, Brother Shankara. I'm honored.
And so we'll close as we always do. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may the Mother and Father, the Divine Being that opens the prayer that we start these sessions with, know that that Mother, Father being holds you in their loving and protective embrace. So, with that thought, and may we all be well and in bright spirits, we'll go ahead until the next gathering that we can
Good night.
is Saturday.
Good night, Brother Shankara.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. And thank you for being with us. It is such a wonder to be with the congregation and share these experiences of spirituality. Hari Om indeed. Good night.